Hey everybody, I'm Mark Fetter, co-founder of Everyday. I just had a great conversation with Dr. Genevieve Morgan. A few things we talked about are what skills can a student put on their high school resume for a college application, and how is that different than an application for a job? What can students do to stand out in their college application, including great examples from some of her current clients? And lastly, is what can students be doing during the pandemic to demonstrate leadership and just show their true colors even though they're stuck at home? Enjoy the interview. Genevieve, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So the main question I want to talk about today is a high school resume. What's unique about a high school resume compared to, a professional resume, and what should a student put on their high school resume?
Well, something that the resume should have and that should bleed into the other parts of the application, which you won't see on a regular job resume, is that you need to be able to imbue it with, you need to communicate that you're curious, that you're passionate, that you're innovative, a lot of things that educators call soft skills. So they're not, they're not it's not like you know how to divide, or you know how to code. Those are more technical skills that you would learn in a classroom, but they're interpersonal skills. And so it can be a little challenging to communicate those to colleges, but that's really what admissions officers are looking for. I served when I taught at independent schools. I served on the admissions committees for many of those, and I know from both a college and a high school admissions committee perspective that you're looking for the kind of kids who will be fun to teach, who will help sustain and create the fabric of an institution, and that will be kind, that will be good roommates, good classmates, people that other people want to collaborate with. So the way you do that on a resume is it's things that maybe wouldn't go on a regular resume, like maybe what were some projects that you worked on, what were some innovative things that you did. So I have a kid this year who he went to go do some community service, and he realized that one of the things that people are lacking is an ability to wash their clothes. Homeless people don't have access to washing machines. So he actually designed a portable washer for clothes. It's like a salad spinner. I don't know. Have you ever used a salad spinner?
Yeah. I have one on top of my fridge. Hasn't been used in a while, but yes.
All right. So he took that design and he made it bigger. And then he used a laser printer to make the parts. And he actually has, a working model of this very cheap to make portable contraption that homeless people can use to wash their clothes. So, that's something that went on his resume. And then the things that are on your resume should then inform the parts of your application. So when you have to list your extracurriculars, I'm working with a lot of kids right now on the personal statement, on the University of California personal insight questions, the PICs. So these are the places that you want the things that are on your resume to, you want them to inform these parts of your application. And then the resume also will go to your college counselor, who writes you an overall letter. You can give it to the people who write your letters of recommendation, because often teachers and counselors don't see what you're doing outside of the classroom. So it's really your job to communicate that and to fill in those gaps.
That's great advice and great little anecdotes. Follow-up question to that would be, what would you recommend to a student who is struggling to decide how to balance what stories to tell on a resume versus perhaps what could come through in a letter of recommendation or their essays, or should they be trying to say it all across, every element of the application?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think that you want to be repetitive. So I think that's what you're asking about. And so the teacher recommendations are really going to focus on what you do in the classroom. So they're going to use anecdotes about, a project in math and how you how you brought the group together and sort of steered them in the right direction, or they're going to talk about a particular paper that you wrote about the Great Gatsby. And only if they know about a particular, let's say, I have a kid right now who raised $52,000 for the Leukemia Society, and he did it through running ping pong tournaments at his school.
Right.
So if the teacher didn't know about that directly, let's say the teacher didn't take part in the ping pong event, then he or she would not write about that. So I think that you do want to be strategic about what goes in what place and make sure that you're not repeating yourself. You should take every opportunity to tell the admissions committee something new about yourself that they don't know. And so that's why using a college counselor helps, so you can really strategize what to highlight where, and to make sure that you are able to convey the idea that you're this really well-rounded person.
Yeah. Now, you've given so far at least two great examples of clients that you have that have done amazing things, between raising the money for Leukemia Foundation to creating this portable washing machine for the homeless. I imagine there's some people who might be watching this who say, well, I'm not that impressive. You know, how do I compete against that person? So what would you tell somebody who's trying to, you know, quote unquote, stand out, but may not have something quite as overtly awesome that they could, you know, highlight on their resume?
Well, I like to think that everyone has a story to tell, and they need to be reflective, and sometimes they need someone to help them be reflective. But I've never found a student who is not interesting. Even if they think that they're not interesting, they always have something cool about them. And then the other thing is that admissions counselors are looking for real people. They want authenticity. And so I think it is wrong to think that the personal statement has to say, like, I cured cancer. That's just not realistic for a kid. Or, you know, I wrote, you know, I saw a car accident and I administered CPR and I saved a person's life. The college admissions people are really looking for small moments. And so I usually have my students focus on those small moments. So one of my favorite essays from last year was a student about backpacking with her dad, and you know, how they got lost while they were backpacking. So she didn't scale, you know, Kilimanjaro, or it was just a very sort of quiet essay. The student who wrote the ping pong essay also told me there was nothing interesting about him, but it's through asking questions that you know, that story came out, that he raised $52,000 through a ping pong tournament. So he didn't think that was interesting, but you know, I realized that was interesting. And once I asked him enough questions, he came to that realization too. So I would argue that everyone has something interesting about them. And also, again, that college counselors are looking for those quiet moments. Another one of my favorite essays, written many years ago by a student who ended up at UCLA, was about, and she just finished her Ph.D. at UCLA, actually, in English. And her essay that she wrote to get into college was about her mother reading to her every night before she went to bed, and how her mother, who was a librarian, inspired in her a love of reading and of books. So again, something that probably we have all been read to by our parents. It's not a unique situation, but it was just a really beautiful, heartfelt essay.
Yeah, that's such a good reminder that, like you said, the schools want authenticity, and then we all have a story to tell. You know, I think it's easy to get either swept up in the rat race and the pressure of the application process, but also just forgetting that we all live a unique life with a story to tell. And, you know, I think, like you said, part of the value of hiring a consultant, or even if it's not hiring a consultant, getting objective, you know, input from people about how they see your life and some of the things they might have observed you doing that you might not think is extraordinary, but is a good sort of nugget to a story to tell in the application.
Exactly. I want to add to that, that often the people around you, if you, the applicant, talk to your mother, your father, your aunt, you know, and you ask them about things that they remember about you, you will find stories there that as a student, you may just not have thought about. But I
Mhm.
often find out some incredible things from parents. You know, they have a different perspective on their child, and they will tell me about a story, and then I'll say to the student, your mom told me this, and the student will go, oh yeah, that's not that important, that's not that interesting, and I'll say, yeah, that is pretty interesting. So use the people around you. If you're the applicant, ask, you know, it's all right to ask for help, and you might get some great ideas.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the importance and value of bringing the parent into the conversation because, again, as I mentioned a minute ago, there's a lot of pressure around this process, and understandably so. Research has shown that a lot of that, the pressure that students feel is that they don't want to let their parents down. And
Definitely.
so what advice would you give to a parent, or how do you currently communicate with your clients, on the parent side, to say, look, we're going to help your child succeed and get into a great college, but let's not add extra pressure here, or let's at least, if not adding it, help the student recognize that it's not there, and that's kind of internalized on their part.
You are going to the heart of what a college counselor does mostly is I say to the parents, my job is to help you so that you don't have to nag your kid. Um, and so, you know, I can sort of be the middle person. If the parent is anxious about something, the parent can call me and tell me about that anxiety instead of telling the student. Um, and then sometimes I have to say to the parent, you know, you and I already went to college. This is your child's opportunity to go to college, and we really need to find a good fit for that kid. Unfortunately, we're all wrapped up in you know, the lists of what are the best 50 schools, and often those are driven by metrics that are not going to ensure that your child is happy, or, you know, comes out of that institution loving learning, or with lots of opportunities for internships. So but you know, I had two kids who went to college, and it's very anxiety producing from the parents. You want to make sure that you're giving them everything you can to help them in their application process, which is so difficult now. I mean, I applied to 2 colleges when I was applying to school. When my kids applied, they applied to 10 each. And I helped a student last year who insisted on applying to 20 schools. So, you know, you're much younger than I am, but it was so much easier back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, even for me, it was a much simpler process. But um, yeah, on that note, do if you have a client who comes to you without a clear idea of necessarily maybe what they want to do with their career or even schools, how do you help someone think about what school, like basically school fit?
Yeah.
How do you identify school fit?
It's funny. I just met with a kid yesterday who, it is so much easier if they know. Yeah, you know, if you start with what careers might you be interested in, and then you work backwards. Okay, so these are the majors that will prepare you for that career. And then you can say, well, you know, for that, let's say journalism, like these are the schools that are really good for journalism, and then we're going to focus in on those. I usually do a sort of card sorting with kids to say, like, do you want a big, middle-sized, small institution? Do you want rural? Do you want urban? Do you want something that has, you know, a Greek life? Um, and so through those answers, I can start to come up with a list for the kids who don't know what they want to do. And how would you know? Like, I started as a marine biology major in college, and then I ended up an English major. College is about discovering what you like and trying new things that you don't have the chance to do in high school, like archaeology or anthropology or ocean geography. So, you know, those kids are perhaps uh, I mean, that is probably where most kids should be, not knowing their majors. So, like the student that I met with yesterday, he doesn't know what major he wants to be, but he is really intrigued by co-op programs where you can work and often get paid and you get credit for those classes. So he's really drawn to those real world experiences. And so we're looking at schools that have co-op programs. Um, so that's one of the ways to assess fit even if you don't know where they might end up job wise in the future.
Hmm. So it's, I love that process, the card sorting exercise you just mentioned. And it sounds like a lot of that exercise is geared towards the experience of college, as you just mentioned. It's about exploring your interests and curiosity. Because of the massive college debt situation and problem in this country, a lot of people look at college as through the lens of it's a stepping stone to a career. So it's all about the career direction, which is understandable.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so my question is, with coronavirus and how it's affecting higher education and the perceived value of it, what is your take on what do you think is the future of higher education? Because I think as purely as a career stepping stone, the so-called unbundling of higher education, I think there's a lot of credibility to, hey, there's other ways to get yourself a really good job, but what you're missing is that experience. And I don't know if there's anything that can replicate that. So there's not really a question, but more of a statement. But I love, because personally, I learned more from the experience of going to college than I did in the classroom. Just the social emotional learning and growth as a person. So just curious, where do you think things will go?
Well, I totally agree with you. And I think a lot of college is really learning how to be an adult, learning how to navigate the world, learning how to do things like do your own laundry, get to class on time, that kind of thing, instead of, as you mentioned, like, learning about Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales or how to read that in Middle English. You're probably not going to use that skill. Um, but I think I have a really optimistic view, and I think universities will come out of this stronger. I do think some liberal arts colleges are going to close, some small liberal arts colleges. So I think the the field is going to be winnowed. Um, but I think that teaching remotely is causing teachers to really look at what they value and look at the end results and plan backwards to where how to convey that to kids. The opportunity for synchronous and asynchronous learning, the fact that kids can perhaps go back to a lecture and listen to a lecture over and over again until they master the material, I think is really important. I think teachers and professors are doing a lot more group projects, which are more, simulate the working world more. Like you probably at work, you even before coronavirus had some Zoom meetings or some phone calls where each team member did a certain part and then you came back together to put it together. And that's happening more in the classroom now. It's, I think, less lecture based and more project based learning. So I think some of this remote learning is going to carry forward. And hopefully this will make colleges leaner and more flexible. So if I can hire someone in London to teach a class on, banking, that's a great opportunity for students, let's say, in California. Um, and also it makes it cheaper, perhaps, that professor didn't have to fly in to give a guest lecture. So I think there are going to be some really interesting sort of a sea change for colleges, and I'm very optimistic about it. I mean, we have to get through this next year. I also think that some colleges, uh, like one of my daughters went to Wesleyan, and it's a beautiful campus. Um, and they came out of that really curious and actually both my daughters went there for undergrad, loving learning. But there's money spent on things that perhaps having the best dining hall food or some things that colleges probably need to reevaluate their priorities and um, and just readjust.
One more question, which I'm sure a lot of families and students want to know, is what should they be doing with their time during the pandemic when they're at home, self-quarantining? How do we leverage this time towards a productive college application?
So this is a perfect time, or it's been, well, where kids have free time that they haven't normally had to dig into things that really interest them. And admissions folks want to know, like, you weren't just at home watching, Stranger Things over and over again. So I've been encouraging students to do things that they love. One of my students who writes poetry has been submitting it to journals. Another student has created virtual camps for kids in the neighborhood who during the summer now couldn't attend camps, where she will do things like deliver little bags of macrame materials, and then she leads a little macrame class online, or she delivered s'mores, fixings for s'mores, and then the kids all made them at the same time and told ghost stories. So other kids have taken MOOCs, these massive open online classes that are free. And I know a lot of schools are offering them. Harvard had a whole slew of classes. They still are online that people could take. One of my students loves to bake and has taken time to perfect the perfect sourdough and has made to date 40 different sourdough boule, which he then has a little tasting panel that his family tests for, certain qualities. Another student is writing a blog about fitness. So this is a perfect time to really explore and dig into what you love and to show that you are, a bit of an entrepreneur and that you are curious and love learning.
Yeah. Great. Well, I realize, I gave a very brief introduction, but didn't give you the opportunity to necessarily expound upon your services and what you do. So yeah, tell us about your consulting service and perhaps, what makes you unique or what kind of clients do you like to work with?
So I come from a background, I taught at UC Davis and then I taught at some independent schools and I was an AP teacher. So when I first started helping kids, it was essays and supplements and just really enjoyed it. And so now I offer everything, every service, from list building to interview prep. One of the things that I really enjoy is helping kids with scholarship applications. Because there's a lot of money out there, and often people think that if they apply to the public schools, they'll get the best deal. But in reality, a lot of the private schools offer more aid. So that's something that I really enjoy. But I also work with sometimes rising ninth and 10th graders about planning your high school career, because people think that sometimes you have to be involved in 10 different extracurriculars, when in reality, you should find what really makes your heart sing if you're a student and stick with it. So I help, I'm like a full service um, uh, one-stop shop. But I mostly end up helping kids from private schools because a lot of my clients attend very big private schools where there might be very hardworking college counselors, but they often have 300 to 400 kids that they are responsible for, and some families they just want a little bit more one-on-one help with students. And so I'll meet weekly with students and help them generate ideas. I proofread, I help them strategize. I practice for interviews with them. Just any way that I can to make the process clearer, easier. Um, you can't say stress-free, but less stress-inducing.
Yeah,
Yeah, and tailored to them, because the process is really different for every child.
great. Well, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure speaking with you as always. For anybody who is interested in learning more about Dr. Morgan's services, we'll be providing information in the notes below. And if you enjoyed this interview and would like more advice from other consultants as well, we will be hosting more, so please subscribe below. Thank you.
Thank you.